Moving this from here to here costs 10 times more than 2 years ago. In fact, freight charges have gone up so much that you could be forgiven for mistaking the chart for a Bitcoin bull run. Of course, this is putting a lot of strain on physical product businesses. So how did we get here? How long is this going to last, and what can you do about it? So that's what we're covering today. If you're new here, consider subbing, because we release videos like this every single week. And if this does help you navigate these more expensive waters, please consider dropping us a quick like. That really helps us. And as usual, this video will have a hidden product somewhere within it. So try spot it, let us know in the comments below if you do, the timestamp and type of product it is, and you could win our product ideas this month. So in understanding this shipping crisis, the first thing we have to understand is a concept called FEU, and that stands for 40-foot equivalent unit. And it's a measure of volume in units of a 40-foot long container. So one 40-foot container would equal 1 FEU, while two 20-foot containers would equal 1 FEU. And just how big is that? Well, to give you a ballpark, one 40-foot container would hold about 300 refrigerators. On the other hand, a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent. And of course, that represents a 20-foot container. So how much has the cost of shipping an FEU gone up? Well, the Drewry's World Container Index actually shows the cost of shipping FEUs over time. And looking at this, it's actually increased 368% over the past year. So it now costs $9,330 to ship an FEU. And that's from Asia to North America. But to simplify that, because there are other costs involved in shipping which are just mandatory, the effective rate to move an FEU from China to the West Coast in the US is between $13,000 and $19,000. That's 10 times more than before this crisis. Now, if you're shipping to the East Coast, those rates are usually $2,000 more, putting that at an effective rate of about $16,000 to $21,000. And if you're shipping to Northern Europe, that effective cost is between $15,000 and $20,000. And these higher rates do not mean improved service. In fact, schedule reliability has only gone down. Only 35 to 40% of carriers are actually delivering within 1 day of the scheduled delivery, and only 25% are achieving that at the West Coast US ports. And on top of that, those that are late, 75% of those that are late by 10 days. So to make this more relatable, what does this price increase actually mean for you as a business owner? Well, remember that a 40-foot container can hold about 300 fridges. So if we spread out the shipping cost between the fridges, we can work out a shipping cost per unit and make this more relatable and comparable. Well, before the pandemic and this crisis, the cost of shipping one fridge, if we do it per unit, was between $12 and $16. Now that this crisis has occurred, it costs about $70 per fridge. And probably the most important question here is, where is this problem coming from? And there's 5 areas I want to specify here. Number 1, increased demand. Of course, increased demand means more things need to be shipped and restocked. And this spike in demand comes from US consumers having more spending power. This is actually because during the pandemic, more people have been able to save. In fact, monthly average savings have more than doubled. Additionally, you have unemployment benefits, which aren't ending until September this year. And the government is issuing billions of dollars in advance payments for child tax credits. And of course, we have to also factor in occasional surges in like panic buying that have occurred during this time. Number 2, a shortage of containers. Now, containers are of course an essential piece of the supply chain. The strange thing is that these are a massive cause of this problem, and yet they are scattered around the world. This year, more containers have been produced than ever before. In fact, this year, container factories produced 5.4 million TEUs, or 20-foot containers. That's actually double that which was produced in 2019. So that begs the question as to why there is a shortage of these steel boxes. Well, actually, the problem is not the number of these containers. We have more than enough. The problem is where those containers are. And availability of these containers has become extremely strained in certain parts of the world because you have large volumes of containers stranded in other areas of the world. And this began in the spring of 2020, in the early days of the pandemic, when consumer demand slumped. In response to that slump, shipping companies cancelled a lot of their routes, primarily between Asia and North America. But what was unexpected was when consumer demand sprang back in the summer of 2020. And this is where the problem began, because all these orders came flying in to restock, ship more products, but you had all these containers stuck in the US. And that meant that exporters in China had to wait extremely long to actually get a hold of containers to ship out those orders. And this is really the crux of the problem, because eventually they would get the containers, but by that time more orders had come in and it became a continual loop of not having the containers on time in the right places. And in fact, it's so bad that some regulators in the US have restricted the movement of containers inland, particularly from the West Coast ports to Chicago, all in an effort to give them time to actually move the massive volume of containers that have accrued at that Midwestern shipping hub. Number 3, limited infrastructure. And it's actually not so much an ocean capacity issue. It's more of an infrastructure capacity issue, particularly with the equipment like containers, but also personnel involved in the process. Just as one example, the Port of LA is actually operating at 160% capacity. So that means even if you could add 1,000 ships to the ocean capacity, that's not going to help the real problem. Number 4, labor shortages at ports. And this one really does help explain that infrastructure bottleneck. One of the problems really exacerbating the container drought is a lack of workers at ports. And this is something that has obviously been fueled by the pandemic. But this lack of workers creates a lot of congestion. In fact, one exec stated that the average unload dwell time for its customers using containers is up 70% over 2019. And that's primarily because of a lack of workers who actually handle the containers. And so at a time when we're really trying to get containers back into circulation and where they need to be, that is creating a lot of congestion and delays in actually getting the containers back into circulation and worsening the problem. And in fact, the time it takes to get a container from China to Chicago is now 70 days or thereabouts, where it used to be about 30 days. And number 5, the higher cost of buying the containers themselves. And as with all capitalism, when demand increases, the price of that commodity increases. And so even though we have more containers than ever and more than enough to actually do the shipping, the actual price of buying a container that's manufactured has absolutely skyrocketed. It's actually double that of 2019. So of course that base cost is another factor fueling the increased price of shipping to businesses like yours and mine. So what can you do? Number 1, you could struggle through. If you sell really high value goods or goods that are perhaps seasonal or have a time limit on them like fashion goods, you're really going to need to pay whatever it is to move that stock. If you're an Amazon seller or similar, you want to retain your ranking. So you've got to keep ordering and shipping, regardless of the rate that you can get. As an Amazon seller, you also have Q4 coming up, which you do not want to miss. And so really the best you can do is shop around for the best quotes at this time and book early. But one benefit here is that competitors who do choose to sit out, those who do run out of stock, they leave holes in the market, holes that you can plug with your supply. 2, and included in 1, is to pass that added cost on to the customer. So, just like we did with the fridges, work out what does it cost you to ship per unit. If it used to cost you $2.50 to ship your products and now it costs you $6.50, well, your price to the customer, your sell price, should be $4 more. And this is very important because this is how capitalism works. As that price goes up, yes, demand may come down a little bit, but it keeps you profitable so you can continue running your business and continue supplying customers. They can still get what they need. That dip in demand will help us actually solve the container crisis because now less orders are coming through and everything can begin to stabilize again and return to more normal price levels. Number 3, you could hold off. Now, some may choose to hold off on starting their business in physical products or hold off on reordering products, and that is an option. One thing I would say here, though, is this does not look like it's going to be short-lived. I don't believe this is a problem that's going to go away in the next 3 to 6 months. 4, source locally. Of course, another option is to actually source your product locally, whether it's a new product or in fact finding a local manufacturer of a product design you already have. Yes, that cost is probably going to be more in terms of manufacturing, but it's likely going to be less than paying the international shipping cost at this point. And an additional benefit there, of course, is marketing. Things like made in the USA. 5, go premium. Now, you know that I advocate this continually, but it is important. The higher value your goods, the easier this should be. One CEO actually said that if you're Nike or Adidas shipping shoes in that container, which have big margins, then you're going to be okay. But if the total value of your container is $30,000 and you're going to ship it for $11,000 or $15,000, then you've got a problem. Now, that's not to say you can't work through it, but generally smaller items like a lot of us e-commerce sellers sell that have higher prices and higher margins, you're going to have more buffer there. You're going to have more cushion for this situation, and higher prices, it's going to be easier to add $4 onto a $50 product than add $4 onto a $20 product. And 6, book early. Seco Logistics is actually recommending you book 8 weeks in advance. Also stating that retailers who want their goods in store on November 1, let's say beginning of Q4, well, you want those goods on the vessel by September 1. And when does this end? Well, the general sentiment does not look so good. Most execs don't believe this is going to change anytime before Chinese New Year next year. That would be Feb 2022. And some are even more pessimistic, saying that unless demand levels really change by consumers getting spooked by inflation or something else, demand levels actually need to come down 60% if we are to see shipping rates return to anything near normal. And you also have to add in the fact that shoppers are soon going to be buying fashion items again. They are going to be renewing wardrobes. They're going to be buying back to school items again. All of that for the first time in about 2 years. And probably the most prominent one is that US ports are going to fill up in August because we have peak season on the way. A lot of logistics managers have said that we're going to see the longest vessel wait times since Feb of this year, and a lot of shipments are actually going to have to be rerouted from the west coast to the east coast. And if we look at it at just a macro level, the global shipping container industry is set to grow at more than what it grew this year over the next 5 years. But overall, from my research, here is what I can see. Chinese container factories are producing more containers than ever. Regulators are actually putting rules and restrictions in place to get containers back into circulation. The upcoming peak season is going to make the situation worse. And then panic restocking just before and during and just after Chinese New Year, which always happens by businesses trying to get their orders in, is also going to make this problem worse. And so in my opinion, I think we're going to have containers back in circulation and at a level where things can be fulfilled at our normal general rates after these events have occurred, so more towards the middle of next year. So maybe somewhere between June and August next year before peak season. And I don't believe that these levels are going to return to the normal. I think they're going to stay above the normal, but they are going to be a lot better than what they are today. So instead of 9,300 per FEU, I would expect that base rate to be more around 5 grand per FEU. And so adding in all the additional costs for an effective rate, like what you'll actually pay for shipping, well, I think the cost of moving an FEU from China to the US West Coast should fall from the current 13 to 19 grand to somewhere between 8 and 13 grand. Let me know in the comments below, what is the best quote you have got recently? I think this is very important. Which company did you get it from? And we can all collaborate to try help each other out in terms of navigating this crisis short term. And if this video did shed some light on these more expensive waters, please smash that like button for us. It really helps us a lot. But I hope you're all keeping very well, that you're able to navigate this and keep afloat. Excuse the pun. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this, where you're getting the best quotes, and when you think it's going to end. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.